Hey there, quirky folks! Today we're going to look at the weakest project of Phase 4 by far. It's just sad that we waited for a Black Widow movie for over a decade, and the end result did not satisfy the fans the way it should have. Maybe Black Widow could have been better off if there was no COVID and it came out on its scheduled release date. At least it would have been saved by piracy and made more money back in May 2020. But still, there were quite a few flaws in this film, and all of them would have existed even in 2020. Instead of a solo film that's totally about Natasha Romanoff, Black Widow tried to cover all aspects. It tried to answer the questions we've had about her, and it introduced Natasha's successor in the MCU.
Ugh, that was disgusting.
At the same time, it also became an ensemble film. There was a lot of world building that would be carried forward in the sequels, but trying to put its feet in all directions, this film suffered with many problems. The villains, for instance, did not get the breathing room that they needed. And even Natasha Romanoff didn't get the kind of spotlight that she should have got in her final MCU outing. This was a film that was supposed to give Natasha a big send-off after her demise. But instead, it turned out to be a film that had many nonsensical things. Now before we look at them, it would be nice if you guys would hit the subscribe button, and do press the bell icon so you don't miss out on our future videos. Okay now, here's everything in Black Widow that's devoid of logic. My Little Pony. DC has a person who loves his pink unicorn a lot.
Pinky.
But apparently, he doesn't love Marvel as much.
Fuck Marvel!
And there goes his chance to be an MCU movie. Anyway, I was talking about pink unicorns. Marvel brought us their own pink unicorn lover with Yelena Belova. Now I'm not going to argue about how an 11-year-old Natasha was able to fly a plane in a panic situation without any specialized training. I'll let that go under the suspension of disbelief section. Maybe she was taught a bit back when she was in the Red Room, and she managed the rest anyway. But moving on from that, we saw little Yelena carrying her plush toy of Twilight Sparkle in Cuba. This toy was from My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic. Marvel's prop departments are usually amazing. But the problem with the Twilight Sparkle unicorn is that it was designed in the 2010s, and the version that Yelena was holding came out in 2013. So Yelena having that specific toy in 1995 just doesn't make any sense. I know that this is nitpicking at the grandest level, but we've picked almost everything that wasn't right with the film. The Loki series showed us that Marvel usually takes care of props very seriously. They even showed us drinks like Josta and Boku, which were discontinued in the 90s. So Yelena could have held any other toy and it wouldn't have mattered. Maybe this was some timeline mischief from Sylvie or the TVA. Let's not think so much about this. But another technical flaw in the film came with the BMW X3. The Black Widow movie takes place right after Captain America Civil War. So the year of the story is 2016. But when we saw Natasha and Yelena steal a BMW in Budapest, they drove the BMW X3 model.
You can't just steal a guy's car.
So you want me to chase him down and unsteal it?
Now this is a car that hit the markets in 2017 at the earliest. So that's the second technical flaw in the movie. We just have to believe that the Marvel Cinematic Universe would have produced this model a year earlier. Now moving on from the technical mistakes that don't make sense, let's talk about what seemed wrong about the characters and the story. What's up with ALEXIE? The film raised several questions about ALEXIE Shostakov, aka the Red Guardian. What's his backstory?
Good boy, ALEXIE. Good boy.
How did Russia gain the super soldier serum, and why didn't they produce more super soldiers? On top of that, why was ALEXIE so fixated upon the fact that he fought Captain America? He was clearly in prison for more than 5 years. So he couldn't have met Steve Rogers since Steve was frozen until 2011. Keeping that in mind, why would ALEXIE ask Natasha whether Cap had told her anything about him? It just doesn't add up. In the prison scene, he said that he fought Cap in the 80s. Now did he fight a patsy Captain America created for propaganda by Russia? Or did he fight some other version of Cap that came after Isaiah Bradley during the 80s?
Forget what you did for this country.
He could have fought a multiverse Steve, or maybe he was just a bit cuckoo in his brains. Anyway, ALEXIE's obsession with Cap raises a lot of nonsensical and unnecessary questions. The ending. Director Kate Shortland decided to keep the ending of this film ambiguous. We saw Secretary Ross approaching Natasha with his bazillion jeeps. Now at this moment, she decided to stay and let her family get away.
Hey, you take care of yourself, okay? Don't worry, I got this.
And then the scene ended abruptly. 2 weeks later, she was blonde and all ready to meet Steve in a Quinjet. What happened in between this period? How did she escape? Ross was hunting her like crazy in the beginning of the film. What sort of a deal could Natasha have made with him? And it's not just this ambiguous ending that bothers me. It is the fact that after being free, she united with Cap, broke others out of the raft. Doesn't that make Ross look like a total fool?
All over it.
I mean, he let her go, and the next thing she did was attack a prison controlled by him.
Priority call from Secretary Ross. There's been a breach at the raft prison.
Yeah, put him through.
Tony, we have a problem.
Please hold.
No, don't.
No wonder he is going to turn into the Red Hulk in the future. All the Avengers have been making him super angry.
We got Barton, we got Wilson, and the other guy, the incredible shrinking convict. Rogers is on the run. You got no friend.
Anyway, this ambiguous ending raises some unnecessary questions, which will never be answered, since Natasha is DEAD. Keeping this thread dangling is really devoid of logic. Why Widow didn't go with her family? Wouldn't it have made more sense if Nat had actually left with Yelena and co? I mean, she had just found her family after 21 long years.
Family, back together again.
You got fat.
Smelling water weight.
I believe that character-wise, it would have felt right to see her leave with her old family. She could have gone with her sister and the newly freed widows in their jet. Ross couldn't have done anything about that. Together, Nat and her widow army could have freed the other Red Room agents that DREYKOV had placed across the world. And after probably spending a year or so doing that, Nat could have united with Steve and Sam in her short blonde hair. Or maybe she could have united Steve with her family and the freed widows. Together they would have helped in freeing Sam, Wanda, Clint, and Scott from the raft. And this is where ALEXIE could have actually met his nemesis, the real Captain America. After those events, Nat, Sam, Steve, and Wanda could have gone their own separate ways sometime between Black Widow and Infinity War. But sadly, Nat went with Ross, and we have to leave it at that. Why weren't they blending in?
And here you are, not so sure. I get it out.
Let's rewind a bit.
Yeah, it's rewind time.
Back in Budapest, Natasha and Yelena were roaming around freely even after being chased around by Taskmaster and Ross's people. Yelena was even referring to Natasha as an Avenger time and time again. That's because Nat is a famous Avenger and a high-profile celebrity. How is it that no one recognized her while she was on the run? At least she could have tried to put on a disguise. She didn't even wear Marvel's trademark hat and glasses to try and keep a low profile. Spy assassins usually try to blend in with general public. We saw a bit of that in Captain America: The Winter Soldier, but none of it in Black Widow. And this point leads me to Taskmaster. Why was she in the film? Taskmaster was the biggest disappointment of Black Widow. We had predicted the identity reveal back in January 2020, so I personally liked it when my theory came true. But most people on the internet haven't liked what Marvel has done with Taskmaster. That's because they didn't actually show her straight up copying the moves of her opponents. She did it once with Black Widow, and then she picked a few tricks from other heroes. That's it. On top of that, she didn't get a lot of screen time or any other great fight sequences either. Having Taskmaster in this film wasn't the right move at all. The Red Room and Taskmaster were supposed to be major secrets kept from the world. But Taskmaster was ramming her self-driving tank all across Budapest while roaming in her eye-catchy blue suit. How is it that none of the authorities were looking around or asking any questions about what Taskmaster did in Budapest? It's crazy. Black Widow tried to be a Jason Bourne-like grounded spy thriller at times. But then it also tried to be a typical Marvel movie with an overbloated final fight. It mixed two genres, which just didn't sit together at all. How did no one find the Red Room? The Red Room was a big floating base hiding among the clouds in the sky. We heard that it kept on changing its location. Having a Red Room like that allowed for a cool-looking action sequence when it crashed. But how did no one spot a giant flying base through their satellites? S.H.I.E.L.D. and Tony would have had their own satellites. S.H.I.E.L.D. would have come across the Red Room and launched an investigation. That's because the base didn't have the cloaking tech of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s helicarriers and Quinjets. But let's just leave it at that. How did DREYKOV survive? The explosion of the building was gigantic. It should have killed Antonio, but she survived with a big scar on her face. Okay, I'm willing to believe that. But did DREYKOV survive the blast without any scratches? Did he receive a tip at the last moment? This is a problem that could have been solved with just a single line of dialogue. But instead, we got this pheromonal lock as a plot device. I know it is a thing in the comics, but don't you think that it feels kind of stupid? And don't even start me on Natasha breaking and fixing her nose on her own. It wasn't hilarious, and not even in a good way. No Hawkeye. Ever since the Avengers, people wanted to see the past that Hawkeye and Black Widow had together.
Just like Budapest all over again!
You and I remember Budapest very differently.
Instead of trying to force Taskmaster or the other new characters like Red Guardian into this film, Black Widow should have devoted its time to giving us a bit more from Nat's past. Clint should have had a role for sure. Then we would have seen his adventure of Budapest with Nat instead of just hearing bits about them.
This is cozy.
Barton and I spent 2 days hiding out up here.
That must have been fun.
Not having Hawkeye in the movie was a big miss, and probably a bad move. Instead of fully giving fans what they wanted, the film just partially answered a few questions and left us with a few more. Usually, the movies that do a lot of show and tell turn out to be great, but there wasn't a whole lot of show in this one. We just kept on getting explosions and dialogues about what happened in the past without actual scenes showing those events. The only flashbacks we did get were the opening scene, the intro, and the building explosion. After all these problems, the one big positive from this film was Yelena Belova. Because Florence Pugh is the absolute best. She's a doll. But still, it's just sad that MCU standard was dropped when it could have been maintained easily. Instead of getting a dark spy thriller along the lines of Captain America: The Winter Soldier, we got a rushed film that tried to do way too much in its 134 minutes runtime. So it naturally had to fail in a few internal and external aspects. It's okay if you guys like the film. Even I liked it on my first viewing. But it had some fundamental flaws which couldn't be ignored. Did you guys pick anything else in the Black Widow that was devoid of logic? Let us know in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. And don't forget to check out some more fun videos on our channel. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye!